guys. It's so fun to be here. I'm going to talk to these people right here. You're going to get all my attention. Get off your phone. I'm just kidding. You can be on your phone. No, this is a really great opportunity for me because I get to talk about something that I'm passionate about and also something that I think a lot of people are passionate about. This week, on Monday, heard Steve Young speak. I would say I'm not really a great big football fan. My mom is, my husband is. I sit through a lot of games. One of our clinical directors is a massive football. But it was very interesting to listen to Steve Young because he told this story that I thought very much so relates to us and what we do here. And he talked about a guy named Reggie White. And Reggie White, he said, is 6'5" and weighs between 350 and 400 pounds. And he said his body feels like this. And he said that very, very often, all of the preparation for the football game on Sunday would be around how to not get sacked because he could completely dominate the entire game. And so Steve Young and Reggie had been friends for years and years, and they knew each other very well. And I just thought, he did a good job of taking us on to the field of a football game, and he did such a great job of helping me to feel like the intensity of the crowd and, the bosses that are there and just the feeling, like he talked about, some people are spending a lot of time thinking about their past injuries. Some of them are just afraid. Some, are excited, thinking about like the anticipation. Maybe their body is just riddled with adrenaline. So literally being on a football field, I can't imagine the amount of intensity that exists. I thought I would play this for you.
I'll take my chances with everybody else. We had to double Reggie White every single snap. Otherwise, he could single-handedly take over the game. One man changed your offensive thinking for the entire game.
In 8 seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles, Reggie White played in 121 games and recorded 124 sacks.
When I'm on the field, I want to do my best to intimidate the guy in front of me. And I want to do my best to have him intimidated before I play. That means that this week I got to play a good enough game to where he'll look at it next week and say, oh man, look what he did to him.
Right on. So I would say he adds a lot of intensity to the game. One more.
I remember sitting in the locker room in Philadelphia waiting for the last words from Bill Parcells before we go out. And I remember sitting there going, okay, hang in there. Just, don't give up, hang in there, because I knew what was coming. Best player I've ever played with or against, by far, Reggie White.
So what Steve Young talked about that was so interesting is that what would happen is with all that preparation, sure enough, Reggie would come in and sack him. But what would happen is as they would fall onto the floor, onto the field, Reggie would pull him, he would twist so that Steve Young was on top of him, so that it wasn't his 350 pounds, crushing him. And while they're on the ground, Reggie White would go, hey Steve, how you doing? And you could see on Steve Young's face, he was like, I'm doing okay. And then sure enough, next time around, he would get him, twist again. Hey, Steve, how's your dad? And he said, after a while, he would say, you could call me, we could go out to lunch. We don't necessarily have to do this. But I felt like this is such a great example of, this is a quote on this week. Reggie was able to be in this intense environment and still remember I was his friend. You know, and when you think about relationships, we forget simple things like that in intensity. And when we are in life, it's like being on that football field, and we're struggling all the time to show up and to show up 100% and to show up like you talked about in Wise Mind. So one thing I also wanted to tell you that was very interesting was that he said that not only was he big, he was loud. So while he would be, you know, trying to decide where to throw the ball, he could hear him. Roar! He was like making noise, and the closer he got, of course, the louder he would get. And I mean, when I sit in these therapy sessions with people, I feel like they can feel all of these things that create such distress in their lives, and they feel that intensity, and it feels that big, and it feels that loud. And it's so similar, and it runs such a consistent line or a parallel line with what we do here. Think about you feeling overwhelmed, pressured, unsure, stuck. Maybe you're on your repeat. The intensity of light then gets turned up, right? Something else happens. It gets louder, and then sometimes you too get sacked. Reggie White experienced the intensity of the game, but he was still able to stay anchored. Wise Mind is this inner wisdom that we all have. We access our inner wisdom, and we have the power to stay in Wise Mind. We integrate opposites, including our reasonable and emotional states, and we are then open to experience reality as it is. Awareness brings us to know better our own way of being, stops us from reacting from the past. Awareness leans into the future. Clarity begins. He was participating fully, deliberately, even though he was surrounded by intensity. When we understand brain science, we start to understand how we can heal. We don't need to be trapped, even though sometimes we feel trapped. If for some reason the normal response to life's events is blocked, think about this. When people are held down, just like Steve Young was, but this is not the same thing. When people are trapped, prevented from taking effective action, in a war zone, in a car accident, involved in interpersonal violence, or raped. The brain's electrical circuits can continue to fire in vain long after the actual event has passed. The brain may keep sending signals to the body to escape a threat that no longer even exists. Mindlessly responding to stress sometimes is done by eating, using substances, shutting down, engaging in destructive patterns. Perhaps we're like players on the field. Heroic transformation occurs when we increase our awareness, when we can connect to Wise Mind. Transformation is you experiencing neuroplasticity. Neuroscience research shows that very few psychological problems, I love this, are the result of defects in understanding. Most originate in pressures from deeper regions in the brain and drive our perception and attention. This is Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. He says, when the alarm bell of our emotional brain keeps signaling that you are in danger, no amount of insight will silence it. And this is where I feel supported in the work that I do with clients, because I know that no amount of insight that I might have really, in all honesty, can sometimes disrupt a pattern that causes a lot of traumatic stress and a lot of pain. EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, Francine Shapiro, a client directly thinks about an implicit memory. They might even focus on a trigger. And then by using bilateral stimulation, which means back and forth, they're able to hold, present in the moment. Their body understands that they're safe and they're present, and the memory. And while having those two things present, this dual attention allows the body to take the memory, let it pivot, shift, and get processed, and perhaps eventually get filed and digested. The memory is still present, but the distress surrounding it has numbed. My favorite way to describe how this happens is the 8th grade guy that I had a really big crush on, and he would come walking behind me while I was at my locker, and I could barely breathe. Now, back then, that's how it was. But now when I think about his face, there is no emotion at all. None. That's like what happens through EMDR. Although every person with a traumatic history, if they watched a tennis game, if it was only about the bilateral stimulation, would miraculously be healed. So neuroplasticity is a big part of where we go. When you recognize that you have choices, you can start to dream. EMDR doesn't just provide freedom from one's traumatic past and desensitization, but it replaces voices with more kind voices. You can know that if you put yourself on the mat and decide to make changes, you don't have to be trapped, just like we were talking about, or feel misunderstood. You're able to set limits, use your voice, and advocate for your own happiness and satisfaction. You are no longer at the mercy of your own reactions. Instead, you're able to view your emotions as an important source of information and a sign that you're alive. You begin to see and feel your potential, and you resolve your relationships with the people and experiences of your past. You are better able to enjoy your relationships and your adventures in the present. You need not worry that you will be thrown off kilter by any unexpected or unwanted bump in the road. Well, that's going a little far. This is a quote, but pretty close. You're able to surrender your outdated defenses and are free to open your heart to joy, excitement, and love without debilitating fear. A lot of times we feel like we are just these default patterns. We feel like these thoughts that are present with us, that we just fall into this. What we know now through science is not your parents' or your grandparents' therapeutic world. This is not. This is, I'm not going to give you an Instagram quote and escort you to the door. That's not what happens. This is an opportunity to understand that things that we only suspected possible 30 years ago work. These are evidence-based practices. Transformation and reconstruction of traumatic memories occurs. Dysregulated states expand so that you can be here now, live fully in the present, and then process. Implicit means below conscious elements into a new narrative that, as Donald Meichenbaum says, tells a healing story. EMDR loosens something in the brain. I don't know, but I sit there and watch it. It happens. And people do it, their own insight, their own abilities inside of them process past memories and images. It helps them to put traumatic experiences into a larger perspective, and then in all relevant contexts are able to move forward. People may be able to heal from trauma, and they don't even have to talk about it. A friend of mine was able to process. She spent a year and a half helping someone, and the entire time, the event that she was processing was called strawberry oatmeal. The client never revealed to the therapist what it was that she was processing. She did not even want to say it out loud. But it didn't matter because she could bring it up in her mind and she knew exactly what it was that she was processing. This is very helpful, for example, myself working in community mental health, children that have been with a therapist and with a therapist and with a therapist for years and years, where they're expected to tell their story again and again. What freedom that is when I was sitting in front of a teenage girl that's told her story since she was 7. At 16, I told her, "What do you want to name it? Don't even tell me." She was like, "Are you serious?" So we're able to process those things, and she didn't even have to take and be drugged through what she was once experiencing. It helps you to get to know yourself. It helps you to appreciate your journey. You let go of old patterns. It helps you to connect to that wise mind, to that place inside you that truly directs you and helps you. Even if you get sacked once in a while, it can still help you get to that place. So when you think about Reggie White and Steve Young, and when you watch football, and you think about the intensity that your life is full of, you are not alone. And I hope that, seriously, I myself can be in that kind of intensity and be able to be like, "Hey, how's it going?" And just be peaceful and in wise mind. Thank you.